Everybody has visions of standing in front of an audience and speaking about a topic that they know, right? Well, I kind of do. That's what this episode's about. If I was to be doing a speaking engagement. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, speaking engagements is the topic of the day. However, this particular episode is being pre recorded a couple weeks in advance because of my bicep surgery that I'm going to have on the 25th. This episode is going to actually be released on YouTube on the 28th. Thus, I would be recovering from having said surgery. So, needless to say, I wouldn't be in, say, the frame of mind or have the greatest intangible of all, which is want to actually record an episode of this prior to, during, or anywhere near the time of the surgery. So here I am recording this one. I'm also going to record a few more because I can only imagine for the couple weeks after the surgery, I'm probably going to be thinking exactly the same way. So bear with me. You are getting new content, just to let you know. That's what I do. This is going to be the 175th straight week that I'm coming at you either on Spotify or now on YouTube. Every single episode has been new, has been different. This episode is no different from that. Speaking of which, there is a little difference. The one of one piece that you see in the background right now is called Corner of Color. And that's why when this episode begins, you see a still shot of the corners of this piece of art. The green, red, yellow, and blue that you saw earlier on the outside, only way I could actually get it in the frame was to adjust my camera a little bit in order to make it work the way I wanted it to. What you're seeing now is the center of the picture without the corners. I knew that it was going to be strange if I simply left it this way and then told you that it was actually called color of corner without seeing the actual corners and the colors that they have in them. Just wouldn't make any sense. So I kind of remedied that situation. My goodness. This should be an interesting episode. I'm going to approach it as if I'm standing in front of a crowd about to give a speaking engagement. Because it's something that, in the back of my mind, I kind of wouldn't mind doing too much. Because there are a few topics and a few subjects that I believe that I could stand in front of somebody for 10 to 40 minutes and elaborate on a specific subject to a group that would cater to that subject. And that's what this episode is going to be about. The subject is going to be my time as a corrections officer. Now, yes, I know I did an episode earlier about being a corrections officer, but this is different. I'm going to focus this episode as if an audience has come to see me speak about my time as a corrections officer, giving people sort of a look at the not necessarily day in the life, but the reasonings that I did it and all the things that kind of went around it, almost sort of going full circle around my career a little bit, and sort of capsulizing it to an audience who may be considering becoming a corrections officer, or people who are just curious about some of the things that would go on as far as the life of a corrections officer. I think that would be a pretty fun topic to do. Now, depending on how this goes, I may go ahead and do another episode on something that I feel is worthy of me doing a speaking engagement, which would be automotives. Now, I've done an episode on that before, but the focus was more towards the how to handle being a customer or seeing what's going on, sort of taking you behind the garage door, if it may be, in order to see what was going on. I would be more inclined to talk to you about pitfalls of how to become a an automotive tech, what to look for, what to learn about, stuff like that. I could probably do an episode about that, depending on, again, like I said, how I feel that this one goes. But now, I think it's time to fill in the blank. The one question that I would have that has a blank spot in it that would be worthy of fill in the blank this week would have to be, what do I plan on doing for the couple weeks after surgery? Well, I can assure you that having been in this situation 3 other times prior with a couple of knee surgeries and having my ankle rebuilt, the answer isn't going to be the same as those other days. Now, before I was younger and just had other stuff that was going on in my head, and what I did was I sat and I pretty much ate a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have and watched a lot of TV. To fill in the blank this time, the one thing I'm going to do is find any pizza menu in the house and put it somewhere I can't get it. And essentially eat a little bit cleaner. Because I'm too old to sit there and have 2-3 weeks of eating all kinds of garbage and literally not be able to do a whole lot to at least maintain maintenance as far as calorie count goes. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to control what I eat a lot better and steer away from a lot of the stuff that would be a problem. Like, I'm going to, as much as it's going to pain me, I'm going to steer away from the soda. I'm going to watch the pizza. I'm going to try my best not to do any pizza for a couple of weeks while I'm incapacitated. That way, at the very least, I can put my mind in a place where I can be thinking about eating a little bit more healthy. So the question is, what do I plan on doing for the time that I'm going to pretty much be out of commission? Well, I'm going to use that time to essentially change my eating, almost go back a little bit towards what I was doing as a gym rat. Eat like that for a little while. Okay, it is now time to once again go into the main event. The bell is going to ring, and essentially I'm going to take the podium. Going to stare out and see an audience of, well, I'm not going to think too big of myself. I'll say 30 people come to see me to hear what I've got to say. First speaking engagement. Got these people around me, and it's time to begin. Take a deep breath. I'll grab some water. Take a sip. Get the throat little bit moist so I can begin. And the first thing I would do is say, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to speak to you about some time that I spent as a corrections officer. I'm going to tell you a couple things in this presentation. I'm going to let you know with the idea of why I became a corrections officer. I'm going to tell you about the mindset that it really takes. I'm going to talk to you about how to deal with inmates. Understanding that there is stress in jail and everybody's going to have to deal with it. Also going to talk to you that and tell you the fact of the matter is, when it comes to a job like corrections officer, it's not a whole lot different than the military or being a police officer or a firefighter or an EMT in that regard. There is a price that corrections officers pay, and all of those people who do those jobs like that, there is a price that we all pay, and it's a price that most people don't see. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about realizing just how life can change so quickly and how you notice all that from being a person who works in a jail. Okay. Like I said, I'm going to start with why I became a corrections officer. Now, that's a really funny story. I was actually in between jobs at the time. I was finishing up really as a mechanic and being in the auto industry as far as management was concerned. That's where I was. And I was being in a position where I was essentially daddy daycare. I would take my kids back and forth to school, do the dinners, stuff like that. But it was time to get some more income in the house and to try something different. Turns out my wife looked and saw that there was openings and opportunities for hire with the Department of Corrections for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And she simply asked the question, what do you think about becoming a corrections officer? I thought about it for a second, and in that brief second, it would seem like almost a lifetime of things went through my head, which is kind of funny. Now, I had known a couple of police officers, one that I actually worked with in one of the shops I was in, who started off his law enforcement career as a corrections officer before he then transitioned to becoming a police officer. Now, years before that, there was somebody that I went to school with who was in the town that I grew up in, and he was a police officer. And in the same town, of course, my uncle was a police officer. I had applied to try to become a police officer in that town, and the friend of mine said, if you don't pass the test, there is always another opportunity to get into law enforcement, which is to become a corrections officer. A lot of guys will go ahead and they'll do that. And I never really thought about it. And that was probably, at the time, roughly 20 years earlier. Now, when my wife asked me this question, it's 2016. And I am very much out of shape. Hadn't done any gym work in years. And the first thought that came to mind was, well, I'm probably going to need to get into a lot better shape if I'm going to be in a jail surrounded by a whole bunch of inmates. And for years, we had been talking about going to the gym, losing weight, and doing such things. And I said, well, in truth, I needed a reason to do it. That's always the way that I was. When I was working out heavily, when I was throwing shot put and discus, wrestling, playing football, I had a reason in order to go to the gym and a reason in order to get into shape. And if I was going to become a corrections officer, I now have a reason to get back into shape, because the last thing mentally that I would want to do is not be in good physical shape in order to deal with the inmates that are running around to the jail. So that's essentially how it all began. I then took the test, passed it pretty easily. And then came, well, that's the written test. And I felt, oh, okay, this is going to be good. And after I did that, there was a few other small tests that had to be done. You had to go to a doctor, check your physical. Then you also had to see a psychiatrist that they had in order to make sure you're mentally capable of doing it. And I passed all that. And then I had to just wait to get to the academy. Now, this whole process took about a year. And in that time, I knew that I had more than enough time to get myself into physical shape. Now, in the process, there was a list that my wife had seen that was talking about different things that you needed to do in order to pass a physical exam to be a correctional officer. And I took that list to heart, and I geared my workouts in order to be able to do that list. It had to do with a number of sit-ups over a point of time, a number of push-ups over a point of time, be able to run a half mile at a certain, not a half mile, a mile and a half in a certain time. And so I focused my efforts on muscle endurance, the ability to allow my muscles to continue to function for a longer period of time. Essentially, doing a lot of cardio and lifting weights at a lighter weight, but a higher number in order to develop endurance. Of course, I then end up going to the academy, and I discover that all that workout that I had done in order to pass a physical test wasn't necessary. Now, in my mind, I was like, wow, I knew I wanted to get in shape, and now I feel like I'm in really good shape, which I was. And it turns out that the list that I was working on was a list if you were wanting to become a CERT officer in a jail. Now, what that is, the CERT team is a group of people who go and they enter cells when inmates are becoming a problem, and they extract them. You have to be able to do a lot of physical things in order to do that. And this is a special team that you would join. And I was working off of that list. Now, I didn't actually go out for the team, but truthfully, because of what I was working out for and my mindset, I probably would have been able to pass, because I was training essentially to pass that test unbeknownst to me. But it did in fact help me get into the shape that I needed in order to be ready in case of something happens inside the jail, which of course still made it better. All in all, it was probably for the better. It really was. Now, having said that, physically, I was all there. Mentally, I didn't really know or understand what was required of me to be inside a jail. This is the part that you don't really know until you're in there. I'm telling you right now, the people who I saw and met in my 5 year period of time, 6 years because of sickness and such things, I found myself surrounded by tough people. I also found myself surrounded by some not so tough people. What do I mean by tough people? I was in the jail, and people who were working with me had been former police officers, had been in all branches of the military, had trained in multiple martial arts disciplines, and had done all kinds of sports throughout their lives. Some of these people would absolutely be that person. I don't know if you've heard the term, if you were back to back in an alley in a fight, who would you want behind you? I can tell you that amongst the people who I met while working in the jail, I could probably name off 30 that I wouldn't have any hesitation to be that person that was back to back with me in a fight. Also, there were several people who I wouldn't want to be back to back with me in a fight while in the jail. Trust me when I tell you, there is definitely a difference there. But I'll say this. Some of those really, really tough people didn't make it. And some of those people who didn't necessarily have the physical fighting skills did. Why? It's about their mindset. It's something that you can't teach. Now, granted, some of those tough people had the mindset, and some of those not so tough people didn't. And over the time period, the ones who did not have that mindset ended up leaving the job. What do I mean by the mindset? You have to have a mindset to know that at any moment, the situation can turn bad inside that jail. And you got to be okay with it. There were plenty of people who just didn't have that. Now, I'm not mad at them, because if you recognize it early, you'll be doing yourself a favor, and you'll be doing the other officers a favor if you realize that you're not able to deal with it. Because when the doors close, when you walk in there to get ready to work, they're closed. Yes, you're going to be able to get out of there when your shift is over, but essentially, you're in there with however many inmates your jail has. Some people can handle it, some people just can't. Some of those people who are extremely tough people couldn't deal with it. Other times, it's twofold. You can either not be able to handle it because of the biggest problem that can happen, and that is fear. And the other reason why you can't handle it is because you want to start trouble. Either one of those is going to be a problem. Because if you have too much fear, you're not going to be able to react the way that you need to react if a situation happens. And if you go into the situation that you're just the baddest person in the world, you're going to create a problem because someone may want to test you. You have to have an even keel attitude about it. Realistically, you honestly want to speak softly and carry a big stick. Now, as far as my mentality as an officer, I really focused on the people who had the soft speaking and were able to maintain their poise and their calm. They may not have had the physical skills I had, but they definitely had some talking skills, which of course I've learned to be able to talk my way out of situations, because in that 5 years that I was in a jail, I was nearly in 4 fights, but I was able to de-escalate the situation and never actually had to use physical force in order to quell a situation. Never had to do it. It never got to that point. Now, some of the people who were very soft spoken but did what they had to do and had a command, I would allow them in certain instances to speak softly, and I would stand in a position where I was the big stick just in case they needed it, but they never did. Knowing that, that's the difference, because sometimes the big stick might want to go and smack somebody, but you need to know that sometimes it's better to just be ready in case, as opposed to jump in. And that's a mindset that you have to have instinctively, and you can develop it. For example, the awareness that you get while in the jail is also part of that mindset. I used to call it the 7 mile stare. Now, prior to me being a corrections officer, I had never done any type of security before. And when I was in my rookie year, I looked around and I saw some of the veteran officers who'd been there 5, 10 years, and I would be picking their brain and they would be talking to me about how to conduct yourself inside the prison. And they would be talking, engaged completely in conversation with me, but their eyes would be completely straight out, looking throughout the entire block or the entire area, staring miles ahead almost, looking at all the inmates doing what they were doing, in complete control of what was going on around them, and engaging me in conversation. That's what I called the 7 mile stare, because they saw what was going on around them and they were able to process it and still function in that conversation, which is something that you need to learn how to do. And to this day, I still kind of have that 7 mile stare when I'm in certain situations. I just sort of look around and I'm listening to everything that people are telling me, but I can also see what's going on around me. A sergeant told me very specifically in my rookie year, you need to learn how to jail. And that was part of it. Knowing when to say something, knowing when not to say something, and more importantly, knowing how to say something. Because if you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, in the wrong way, it's going to be a problem. But if you say the right thing at the right time in the correct way, you can de-escalate virtually any situation. And I'm not going to say you can de-escalate all of them that way, but you can de-escalate most situations in a jail by simply doing that. And that goes into how to deal with the inmates. Like that sergeant told me, learn how to jail. That means you need to be able to move throughout the jail. Like I said, you have to know how to talk to people. You have to respect the guys as men. You can't look down at them for where they are. But what you do know is you have to be weary of them. It's one thing to be afraid of somebody, but it's another thing to have a healthy dose of mistrust. Granted, all the gentlemen who are inside the jail are in there for a reason, because when you get to the Department of Corrections in the state level, these people have been arrested, went to trial, and have been convicted, meaning that a jury of their peers has determined that they have broken the law. These men are criminals. And one thing that you will learn very quickly, if you don't really pay attention to it, is that these gentlemen will lie to you every chance they get in order to garner sympathy so that they can use that as a weapon against you. So you need to understand when you're in the jail that you can conversate with people. Nothing says you can't talk to them about sports or weather or how they feel that day, how you're feeling that day. But you don't want to give them your information. Like, you don't want to tell them what kind of car you drive. You don't want to tell them where you live. You can be totally vague. For me, I never told any of those inmates that I was married. I never told them I had kids. I never told them what I drove. I did tell them that I was a sports fan, and I'd talk about that. Told them about the Christianity. I'd talk to them about that. But they never knew anything other than that I walked through the jail, and I'm there, and then I disappear. They didn't know anything else. I never told any of them that I was from the Jersey Shore. None of that ever came up. They tried, but knowing how to jail and understanding that the inmates are trying to mine to see if they can get an edge on you, you need to know to avoid that. Now, the next thing that I'm going to talk about is understanding the stress that everybody in a jail is under. And I mean everybody. From the inmates to the officers, there is a stress that permeates through the building because of the simple fact for the inmates, their lives are essentially dictated by how you feel that day. And your life is dictated by what's going on in their lives that day. And there are administrative people, and there are teachers that are going through there, there's clergy. All these people are in this box, closed off, and it's like a pressure cooker. There's an unwritten, undetermined amount of this stress that is boiling over inside the place. Now, it may look like everything's cool and calm and collected, but in the back of every single officer's mind, the number one focus is, after I clock in, I need to clock out. And if I can make sure that all of my brothers and sisters who are in here clock in, part of my responsibility is making sure that they also get to clock out. And I don't want anybody to leave any different than the way they came in. And having that in the back of your mind makes you a little bit, not to say walking on eggshells, you're walking tall and firm, but that silent pressure, knowing that at any moment something bad could happen, it's just always there. Always there. And because of that, that stress that the veteran officers, like the area where I was at, the 5-10 year range, you're thinking, okay, in order to get out my career, I still got another 10-15 years, whatever it is. I need to keep doing this. I need to stay safe, and I need to sort of make sure the younger officers, as in younger in time, are capable of being able to help me in a situation if I need to be helped, and I need to be able to help them. And you're sort of looking over your shoulder just a little bit to make sure that they're okay. Now, those who are closer to retirement, the big time stress on them is, man, they've seen all the action. They've been there, done that. There's a lot that they've seen, a lot that they've done, and they're just looking at that hourglass and they see the sand almost at the end. And the stress for them is, I gotta just get out of here. I can do it. I've been here long enough. I can hold on. I can get out. I can make it. I can get there. And that's a lot of stress. It may not seem like a lot of stress, but it is, because if you worked in a prison for 15, 20, 25 years, incident free, or at bare minimum, you've had the fortunate nature of not having any major issues that had them have to cart you out over that 15, 20, 25 years. And you know you've only got a little bit of time left. Your stress is, I want to make it out the door, and I want to see it shut behind me, and I want to be healthy, happy, and live the rest of my life. And that's a lot of stress. In fact, it may be more stress than the people who were in my amount of years, the 5 and 10, who were like, well, hey, I still got a lot more time to go. I'm going to just continue to move on, because you still have a long time to think about it. Whereas those people who are close to the end, their stress is just getting to that finish line. And that's a lot of pressure, because they've got a way more behind them in time as far as working than they do in front of them. And to feel the point where you're just clawing your way to that door to get out, it's just, they want nothing to go sideways. And their level can definitely be real high until they clock out. That big whew moment every day when you're close to the end. And then the rookies, they have a level of stress too that is just horribly, it's crazy, because not every rookie is going to make it through their first year. It's just not going to happen. You're going to fail tests, you're going to not have what it takes, and you're going to not make it that first year. So the stress of just being able to survive your first year is intense. I mean, everybody who's been in a jail a couple of years knows that stress of passing the tests, learning what you need to learn. Getting through that first year is intense. And if you do it, you have that little bit of moment. But now there's another kind of stress that hits you, which is that 5-10 year stress, just making sure that people are able to help you, and you watching the other people. And of course, it goes without saying, inmates have a tremendous amount of stress, because, well, that's what their life is. It's stress. It's super structured. Wake up, eat, lock up, shower, yard, log up, get counted every day. the same thing. And when you have that routine every day, the same thing, knowing it's going to be that way for years and years, and even worse, those people don't get out when they're in there for life, that's just now looking over their shoulder, because some of those young inmates, they just don't know how to act. They're the most dangerous ones, in my opinion. The kids who come in there. And at 46, I call kids anybody who's 28 and under. And they come in and they want to just try to be the toughest people in the world. And it's partially because they're a little nervous and they don't want to be there and they're stuck there, but it is what it is. And those kids are the ones, like I said, they're the most dangerous, because some of them just don't know how to act. And the older ones, they get stressed out because of that fact. Those young kids don't know how to act. They got to watch their back, and it just creates a cycle of just stress. And boy, that stress is just, it's insane. It really, really is. And it's so insane that that stress that created by being inside the prison, both as an officer and as an inmate, that it's just overwhelming at times and you don't even realize it. Now comes my least favorite part of being a corrections officer, man. The price you pay. I said that earlier. All first responders, police, fire, military, first aid, and corrections officers, we all pay a price. You don't realize it until you've retired sometimes. I was only in there for 5 years, but I can tell you, I'm paying that price, just like all of my brothers and sisters will pay that price. And it's a price that you don't even realize you're paying until the bill is in your hand. And boy, that price, what is it? For me, and for a lot of people, it's the inability to essentially feel that you can be comfortable in situations. I will honestly tell you that in the 5-6 years I was working in the jail, knowing that there were inmates all over the place and you knew who the bad guys were, as I always tell everybody. When I speak to police officers, they would tell me that they would never want to be in the jail because it's just full of bad guys. And I told them that their job is more stressful because they don't know who the bad guys are. And either way, you still have a problem, because just because you know that the guy who was wearing the brown clothes in the Department of Corrections in Pennsylvania, you know that guy is a convicted criminal, doesn't mean you know what his thinking or when he wants to do something. You don't know. You might have said something to somebody else that he overheard that sets him off. You don't know. And because of that, the price that you pay is that stress, the inability to really feel comfortable in settings that are public. That's my problem. And I know it. I know it. I can go to a restaurant and there are two things that I do, and I do them for a very specific reason. The first thing that I do is I go to the bathroom. And I'm not going to the bathroom necessarily just because I have to go to the bathroom. I'm going to the bathroom so I can look for the way out. What do I mean? I'm walking around the place so that I can see how to get out of it in case something happens. And it's always in my mind. I'm also looking around at people that I may consider trouble. Every time I go out, I look around and I say, well, that person could be a problem. That person could be a problem. And I keep an eye on them. That 7 mile stare, I focus on those people who I think could be an issue. I don't really say it to people, but now anybody who I go to a restaurant with who's listening to this will now know that that's what I'm doing when I go to the restaurant. But it is what it is, and I can't get rid of it. I go to a store and I'm cognizant of everybody around me. Now, 7 years ago, because now I've been retired a couple years, I would go to a store and just do what I have to do and leave. After being in the jail for as long as I was, I pick up on little stuff that I wouldn't have picked up on before. Like, whenever I walk around, I can tell if somebody, a 99.999%, I can tell if somebody is carrying. I see this. And once I focus on that person, I got them in my mind. It's okay, you got it gone. So now, where's the way out? It's over here. Do you look like somebody who is a responsible gun owner? Is it legal? All these things run through my mind. I've probably picked up on like a bunch of people like that. And granted, just like anything else, when you pat down somebody, you got to be careful, because if you miss something, that could be a problem. But I recognize stuff like that. And it causes me a great deal of stress, as well as I just don't tolerate little things sometimes. That's a part of the price that I pay. I get angry very, very quickly. And it's part of the price that I pay. Other people have post traumatic stress, and granted, when you see some of the things that I've seen, and like I said, I haven't seen a lot of really bad stuff, but trust and believe, there are stories that I could tell that I won't, because of I'd rather not remember them. And I can imagine that most people who've been in a corrections officer for, I'm going to go ahead and say, even a year, 2 years, you've probably seen a handful of things that you wish you'd never seen, and you'll never get it out of your head. And that's part of that price that you pay. But finally, being a corrections officer helps you think about your life, because you recognize that you're literally one mistake away from being an inmate yourself. Most people don't think about that, but part of that price, you recognize that if you drink, which I don't, and you get into a car accident and somebody dies, you're going to be an inmate. Somebody gets hurt really bad, there's a really good chance you're going to be an inmate. That whole saying, being in the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time, that's a thing. And there were plenty of people who I was around who definitely had that story. Like the story I told before, drugs are bad. Drugs are bad. And boy, selling them, taking them, either way, that stuff will make you an inmate. Forget being murderer, a thief, that stuff that everybody knows, man, it's just one bad life decision like that could put you and become an inmate. And trust me, even some of my fellow corrections officers have made those mistakes, and those are the ones that just really, it's like getting a gut shot when I think about some of the officers, which I will not get into any of those stories. Even people I worked with have had situations that put themselves behind bars, and it's just insane because you literally know what it's like, but yet you're willing to take the chance and put yourself in that spot. Ugh. But it happens, and it's just sad. At the end of the day, being a corrections officer is a noble thing. But my final take on it is, in order to do it, you have to have the right mindset. You have to know how to jail, as that sergeant said. You have to know essentially how to deal with the inmates. Know that you will, in fact, be stressed beyond what you realize, and that's the real key. There's a point when you can physically see and feel the stress, and then there's a point when you don't even realize how stressed you are, but it's there. And finally, you gotta understand that's something that they don't really tell you when you first become a corrections officer, that there is a price you will pay. And if you're not willing to pay that price, do yourself a favor, do something else. And this concludes my speaking engagement. I think it felt pretty good. I think that I could stand up and tell people that. I think that might actually be a good gig to have. Well, on that note, I'm going to ring the bell, and the main event is going to end. And we're going to go towards some other segments that we like, and the next one is going to be, of course, the Spear of the Week. Now, here I am, as this episode would have aired on the 28th of September in 2024. The leaves are starting to fall, so I'm probably going to get some help with that, considering that I'm down as this is being shown on YouTube. I'm not going to be doing the leaves. And those trees, those 4 giant trees that I love to death during the summer, well, they've decided to not be so friendly again because it's that time of year. So the Spear of the Week, it's going to be those 4 giant trees. Now it's time for my picks. I love doing this. It's a lot of fun. It's a little bit more fun than telling people not to go to jail, that's for sure. But unfortunately, again, this is a set of picks that I'm going to give you well in advance. I haven't been able to close off yet, and in fact, week 2 hasn't come up yet, so I haven't been able to tell you how that's going to go. But eventually, I'm going to get this thing full circle, and I'm going to tell you how I did from all those other weeks, week 2 till now. But I want it out there. Now, granted, this is real crystal ball stuff because this is week 4. Anything can happen in week 2 and in week 3 that's going to severely affect week 4. So this is really prognosticating. If I get any of these or the next several weeks correct, that means I just got the right touch, and I need to go get my FanDuel account and just really hit that thing hard. The games that I'm picking this week, we're going to start off with another Cousins Bowl, Cowboys and Giants. Now, The Cowboys have been the ultimate underachiever. But like I said before, the Giants are really one of the worst teams in the league right now. And part of that reason is because Daniel Jones and his gigantic lottery ticket. It's week 4. I don't know just how long a leash that they're going to give Daniel Jones. I'm going to assume that in week 4, he's still their quarterback. I don't know why he would be. I would think that by week 3, he would probably be gone. But who do they have? And they're already paying him all this money. Like I said before, you got to try to get your money's worth. So at the very least, I'm thinking you really have to, you really got to use him. So Daniel Jones scores 10 points, and the Cowboys, who are going to underachieve later in the year, score 35 and essentially run the Giants out of their own building. Speaking of underachieving, the Bengals are just better than most teams, but they just can't quite make that step. They got to that Super Bowl and lost to, of all teams, the Rams. They would have lost to the 49ers if they played them too, so it didn't really make any difference. But their opponent in week 4 is neither the Rams or the 49ers. It is another team that I consider maybe the worst team in the NFL. But this one is not only, again, the worst players, but it's got the worst ownership, and they just stink. And I think that they're actually even far worse than the Giants. That's the Carolina Panthers. I expect the Bengals to rout the Panthers, and I'm going 42-7. Now, the complete opposite of that is Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. Vikings are in a painful transition year. They have a rookie quarterback who is essentially getting to sit and watch behind Sam Darnold. And I hope that Darnold actually plays this entire season out. And J.J. McCarthy gets to sit back and watch. Because I think that he could be something special. And if you give him the time to sort of marinate, just like Jordan Love got the opportunity to do, I think that you could get yourself a franchise quarterback out of McCarthy. And I think that the Packers have Jordan Love, and he's at that point already. And because he is, he's going to win this game in Lambeau against the Vikings 28-27. Now, here comes what will be a hard-fought, tough game. Buffalo Bills versus the Ravens. Based on what I'm thinking, I like the Bills. It seems like they get rid of their 2 really good receivers, and now Josh Allen has to throw to everybody. And sometimes it seemed like he felt responsible to throw to those 2 receivers he had. But now that he doesn't have that weight on his shoulders to have to throw it to those guys, he can then spread out the ball. And I think it's going to be to his benefit. And I'm convinced that it's going to make him a much better player. And realistically, the Bills will be able to challenge with the Ravens and the Chiefs for that AFC Championship now. And having said that, I think the Ravens are just a little short on their offense. And don't get me wrong, they're good. They're real good. But I think that the Bills are going to win 23-17. I think they're a solid football team, and I think they can pull it off. Now, 49ers and Patriots, I don't have a whole lot of bad things to say about the Patriots. I think they're a team that is trying. They're probably, in my opinion, a middle-of-the-pack team. They're not so bad that they're bottom 5, but they're definitely not top 5. They're, like I said, they're in that 17, range, somewhere between like that. Like, they're not the greatest, but they're not the worst. If you go to play them, you're going to get your money's worth. But I don't think that they are ready to make that step in either direction. I don't think they're going to make a step to become terrible, and I don't think they're going to have a step to become great. I think they're just middle of the pack. And I believe that the 49ers are not middle of the pack. They are a Super Bowl contender, and I think they're going to have a good, solid game against the Patriots. I think it's 49ers 28, Patriots 20. And don't get me wrong, yes, I'm a 49ers fan, and yes, I love the 49ers, but there's a couple games in here that I think maybe they're going to lose. I don't think they're going to go 17-0, but I think that this is not the game that they lose. Now it's time to begin closing down the show. First thing I want to say is join us on our Facebook group, the LIP Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. Check me out on Instagram, Philip Henderson 5102. I'm out there on Twitter, X, somewhere. Find me. I'm out there. You will also know that if you want to check out the archives, which there are a good 160 plus episodes of the LIP on Spotify, you can follow me there if you want and check out old episodes if you haven't heard any of those. And then, of course, the current stuff that you're seeing now, the YouTube stuff. Like and subscribe, and you'll check out some shorts that I have as well as the show. But right now, it's time to give you the words of wisdom for this episode. And I think that it's pretty good words of wisdom that anybody can use, and they're good ones. They really are. The words of wisdom are: remember, your day-to-day could very well be someone else's once in a lifetime. One more time. Your day-to-day could very well be somebody else's once in a lifetime. So essentially, what I'm saying to you is, don't take for granted what you're doing, because somebody out there may be just in awe of what it is you do. Quick example: you may be somebody who gets up and goes fishing every day. Now, there could be somebody out there who's wanted to go fishing all their life and never has. And they get to go one time, and that'll be the last time they ever go, but they'll have that story forever. Remember, your day-to-day could very well be someone else's once in a lifetime. On that note, I hope that your listening to this show was not a one-time thing. Come back, enjoy, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Phil the Lip. And on that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.